The Cook. A historical fiction of love, identity and fate by S.J. Jeppsson. Chapter 41. The Seed of Doubt. Friday, May 24th, 1912. London hummed with the rhythm of industry and society, the cobbled streets alive with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the hurried steps of gentlemen in finely tailored morning coats. The air was thick with the scent of freshly baked bread from the street vendors, mingling with the acrid tang of coal smoke that billowed from chimneys above. Women in elegant silk gowns strolled arm in arm, their laughter ringing like chimes amidst the din of the bustling thoroughfares. Thomas had been away from London for a month, yet the city had not lost its familiarity. He had been consumed with business since his arrival back just 3 days earlier. Meetings with investors, luncheons with political allies, and endless negotiations at the Hollingsworth offices. He had barely had a moment to breathe. And yet, in the rare moments of solitude, his thoughts always drifted back to her. Lydia, his wife. The realization was still new, settling into his mind in quiet, unexpected ways. He had expected an arranged marriage to be a duty, a formality. He had never imagined it could be this. The memory of her laughter, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she had looked at him beneath the soft candlelight of their honeymoon retreat. All of it was imprinted in his mind, as undeniable as the blood in his veins. He missed her, more than he had ever expected. Perhaps, he thought, he would write to her tonight. Perhaps he would even return to Long Island sooner than planned, to bring his wife, his Lydia, home to London at last. That thought lingered as Thomas stepped out of his office and onto the pristine marble floors of the Hollingsworth London offices, the building moving steadily into the subdued rhythm of a Friday afternoon. Doors were closing along the corridor, clerks gathering ledgers beneath their arms, voices lowered with the promise of weekend respite. He adjusted the crisp lapels of his coat and turned the key to lock his office door, the soft click echoing faintly in the quieting hall. Polished shoes moved past him in unhurried strides now, men offering brief nods of farewell as they prepared to depart. Thomas returned the gestures absently, his mind elsewhere, already half-turned toward the evening ahead. He had taken only a few steps toward the staircase when a voice called out behind him.
"Hollingsworth, my good man."
Thomas turned, his gaze settling on the familiar figure of Lord Pembroke, an old acquaintance of his father and a man of considerable social standing, though not one regularly seen within Hollingsworth offices. Pembroke had been there to handle some private business, his coat now buttoned for the street, on the verge of leaving. The older gentleman removed his top hat with a practiced flourish, his greying moustache twitching as he approached with a measured, almost cautious step.
"Lord Pembroke,"
Thomas greeted, offering a polite nod.
"How nice to see you."
"Likewise,"
Pembroke replied, returning the nod as they fell into step together.
"I was just concluding a small matter of investments upstairs. One tries to be done with such things before the weekend sets in."
"Quite,"
Thomas said.
"London grows remarkably eager to escape itself by Friday afternoon."
Pembroke gave a faint, distracted smile as they moved toward the front lobby, where the lights slanted in through tall windows and the last clerks were collecting their hats and gloves.
"My wife has already left the city,"
Pembroke said.
"Bath for the season. She insists the waters do wonders once spring gives way to summer."
"I'm sure Lady Pembroke will find it very agreeable,"
Thomas replied.
"Do give her my regards."
"I shall,"
Pembroke said, then paused. His pace slowed, the ease draining from his expression almost imperceptibly.
"I must say, my boy,"
he continued, lowering his voice,
"I was stunned when I heard the news. Simply tragic. And yet, seeing you here..."
He hesitated.
"Well, you have my deepest sympathies."
Thomas frowned.
Forgive my ignorance, my lord. What news is this?
A flicker of hesitation. Pembroke's lips parted slowly, as though searching for the right words.
Why, the news of your fiancé's passing, of course.
He cleared his throat delicately, gaze dropping for a moment.
Such a charming young woman. We had the loveliest afternoon tea together aboard the Titanic, just the day before.
He trailed off, the weight of implication finishing the sentence for him. The words struck Thomas with the force of a physical blow. For a moment the world tilted. The distant murmur of clerks, the clip-clop of hooves from the street beyond the window. Everything faded into a hollow silence. His fiancé's passing? His fiancée? Lydia? Cold settled in his chest, creeping into his bones. He stared at Lord Pembroke, unblinking.
I believe there has been some misunderstanding, my lord.
He finally said, his voice steady but dangerously low.
Lydia's alive. We were married not a month ago.
A flicker of something uncertain crossed Pembroke's face. His brows knitted, his fingers tightening around the brim of his hat.
Begging your pardon, Thomas. I was told she didn't survive.
Thomas's jaw tightened, his pulse a steady drumbeat in his ears.
Who told you this?
Pembroke hesitated.
There were whispers, of course.
He said carefully.
From those who had been aboard the Carpathia, the survivors. One hears such things before they are ever properly announced.
He cleared his throat, visibly uneasy.
I haven't yet reached out to the Weatherbys to express my condolences.
He added.
There's been no formal notice as of yet from the family. I assumed they were still gathering themselves, but her name was spoken of, and I recall seeing Miss Weatherby listed among those believed lost.
Thomas felt a strange numbness spread through him. He inhaled slowly, evenly.
I assure you, Lord, my wife is very much alive,
he said, his voice measured yet firm.
She was rescued. She returned home. We were married shortly after.
Pembroke exhaled, shaking his head.
Well then, I'm relieved to hear it. Forgive me. It seems there was quite the confusion.
But Thomas barely heard him. His mind was already spinning. Because this wasn't just confusion. This was something else. Something deeper. Something that did not quite make sense. That evening, Thomas sat in the dim glow of his private study, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls. A brandy glass rested in his hand, the amber liquid barely touched. The scent of aged oak and smoke curled around him, mingling with the heavy silence of the room. Yet his mind was anything but quiet.
I was told she didn't survive.
The words played over and over in his head, like a haunting refrain. It was absurd, wasn't it? A mistake. A careless whisper passed from one survivor to another, growing distorted along the way. It was a clerical error. An oversight. Names were misspelled, records misplaced. That had to be it. And yet, had Lydia's name not been listed among the survivors? Had there been no official record of her rescue? His fingers tightened around the glass. He had never doubted Lydia. Not once. Not until today. He exhaled sharply, pushing back from his chair. If there was any uncertainty about the records, he would find out. He would speak with the White Star Line first thing Monday morning. He would see the list of survivors himself. But there was one thing he already knew. His return to New York would come sooner than planned. Because for the first time since their wedding, a thought had entered his mind that he had never before allowed himself to consider. Was the woman he had married truly Lydia Weatherby, or was she someone else entirely? The thought did not leave him. It followed him through the remainder of Friday evening, through a restless weekend, and into the quiet hours of Sunday morning. By that evening, it had settled too deeply to dismiss. He determined himself to visit White Star first thing the following day. White Star Office, Monday, May 27th, 1912. The restless streets of London bustled outside his window, horse-drawn carriages rattling over cobblestones, street vendors calling out their wares, and gentlemen passing by in crisp morning coats, their conversations punctuated by bursts of laughter. It was a city alive, unbothered by the lingering ghosts of tragedy. Yet, for Thomas, there was no escaping the words that had taken root in his mind.
I was told she didn't survive.
At first, he had dismissed Lord Pembroke's statement as a simple mistake, one of the many errors that had emerged in the chaos following the Titanic's sinking. He had reassured himself that these were merely the murmurs of miscommunication, an unfortunate consequence of a disaster too great to properly document. But the thought had lingered through the weekend. He had tried to occupy himself with preparations. He'd met with the household staff, discussing arrangements for Lydia's eventual arrival in London, the quiet adjustments that would need to be made for a new lady of the house. He'd reviewed menus, approved furnishings, and spoke at length with the head gardener, giving careful instruction for the spring plantings. Wild roses along the southern walk, lilacs near the terrace, calla lilies for the beds closest to the house, and wisteria trained patiently along the stone columns, so that by the time Lydia arrived, the gardens would already be reaching toward her. He had told himself these were practical matters, necessary ones, and yet, even as he'd filled the weekend with lists and decisions, the question had pressed quietly at the edges of his mind. Lydia had never spoken in depth about the night the Titanic went down. She had mentioned it only in passing, just enough to acknowledge her grief, but never enough to provide details. And he had never asked, not because he wasn't curious, but because he had not wanted to hurt her, because he had assumed she was protecting herself from reliving something too painful to recount. But now the question gnawed at him. Was she protecting herself? Or had she been hiding something all along? The White Star Line's London office stood as a testament to both power and tragedy. Its grand neoclassical facade, imposing and pristine, overlooked the Thames like an immovable fortress. It was a place of order, efficiency, and, most importantly, records. Inside, however, the illusion of authority gave way to something far more disheartening. The rooms were crowded with clerks hunched over massive ledgers, their desks littered with stacks of paperwork, claims for lost property, letters from grieving families, inquiries from those desperate for information. The smell of ink and aged paper lingered thick in the air. Thomas stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor as he approached one of the front desks. A weary-looking clerk, his round spectacles slipping down the bridge of his nose, barely glanced up from the record book he was thumbing through.
Good afternoon.
Thomas greeted smoothly, his tone measured, casual, as if this were a mere formality.
I have a personal inquiry regarding a passenger on the Titanic.
The clerk sighed, adjusting his glasses before looking at him properly.
I assume you're seeking confirmation of a loved one, yes?
Thomas offered a polite smile, though his pulse had begun to quicken.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
The clerk gestured toward an open ledger, a thick, weighty book containing the names of those who had been aboard the ill-fated ship.
We have compiled as accurate a list as possible,
he explained, his voice edged with the exhaustion of repetition.
However, as I'm sure you're aware, some records may still contain errors due to the confusion of that night.
Thomas nodded, flipping through the crisp, ink-stained pages. Names passed beneath his gaze, each one carrying its own untold story. Some saved, some lost. A silent roll call of tragedy. The sheer number was staggering. Over 1,500 souls, each name representing a life cut short, a family left waiting, grieving. He thought of mothers who would never see their children again, husbands who had kissed their wives goodbye on the docks and never returned. The scale of the loss pressed down on him like weight. And then, written in the neat handwriting of an anonymous documentarian, he saw it. The name he had been searching for. Weatherby, Lydia, listed as lost, presumed deceased. For a moment he simply stared. The world around him blurred. He read it again, as if the ink might suddenly rearrange itself, as if it were a trick of the light. But it wasn't. His wife's name, Lydia Weatherby, was not among the survivors. She was presumed deceased. The quiet weight of realization settled in his chest, cold and heavy. Slowly he lifted his gaze to the clerk.
I believe there may be an error here,
he said, his voice carefully controlled, though there was a tension beneath it now.
Lydia Weatherby survived.
The clerk blinked, adjusting his spectacles as he leaned forward to scan the entry himself.
If she's listed among the deceased, my lord, then she was either presumed lost or reported as such by an eyewitness who did not see her among the rescued.
Thomas's fingers curled into a slow, deliberate fist.
But she was rescued,
he pressed.
Surely there must be an amendment, a correction somewhere.
The clerk flipped through another thick ledger, cross-referencing the names with a practiced efficiency. The minutes stretched, and then, with a shake of his head, the clerk delivered the final blow.
I'm afraid not, my lord. There is no recorded correction. Miss Weatherby was officially declared lost at sea. However, if you have additional information that verifies...
Thomas waved his hand at the clerk, turning away from the desk. His breath came slowly, deliberately, as his mind attempted to make sense of what he had just heard. If Lydia Weatherby had perished on the Titanic, who had he married? Thomas stepped out of the office into the cool, damp air of London, but the bustling city streets barely registered in his mind. His thoughts were a whirlwind, and his heart pounded as he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Did Lydia truly perish? Had someone taken her place? Someone who had survived? Someone who had claimed her identity? Someone who was now his wife? His mind reeled back to the first time he had noticed something off. She who had seemed different from the letters Lydia had written. She whose laughter was never quite the same as what he had imagined. She who sometimes looked at him as if she were adjusting to a role. She who had never spoken of the sinking. He had assumed it was grief. But now a darker thought pressed against his consciousness. Was it guilt? He shook his head, willing the rambling thoughts away. This was madness, he told himself. There was obviously a discrepancy in the record. He would fix this. That night, Thomas sat in his private study, the dim candlelight casting flickering shadows across the mahogany desk. A fresh sheet of parchment lay before him, and with deliberate strokes he dipped his pen into ink and began to write.
My dearest Lydia,
he began.
I find myself thinking of you more with each passing day. London is not the same now that I know you are waiting for me in Long Island, and I eagerly await my return to Weatherby House. But my love, something peculiar occurred this week. I came across an error in the Titanic's records. I'm sure it's nothing but a clerical mistake, but it troubled me nonetheless. If it doesn't pain you too much, would you tell me more of that night? I wish to know everything. It's a conversation we haven't yet had, but perhaps it's time. Home to you soon. Yours always, Thomas.
He sealed the letter, pressing the wax with his signet ring, his jaw tight with determination. Thomas rose from the desk and crossed to the bell pull beside the door, tugging it once. It was not long before Henry appeared, composed as ever, his expression attentive but unreadable. Henry Atwood had been the head butler for the Earl and Countess of Grantham longer than anyone alive could properly recall. He had already been an old man when Thomas was born, his hair silvered, his gait slowed, but his determination to fulfill his duties still very much intact. Now, at 92, he was less butler than monument, a fixture of the estate itself. He moved with a measured dignity, his words chosen with the care of a man who had long since learned that silence often spoke louder than speech. And when he did speak, His voice carried the gravity of scripture itself, low, deliberate, and certain, as though every word had been weighed against eternity before being released.
My lord?
Thomas held out the sealed letter.
I need this sent at once, personally delivered to the post, not left with the clerk. It is to go out on this evening's mail.
Henry accepted the letter without comment, noting the seal and the urgency implied by Thomas's tone.
Of course, my lord.
And Henry,
Thomas added, his voice measured but firm.
I'll require passage back to New York as soon as it can be arranged. Tomorrow, if possible.
Henry paused, only briefly.
Very good, sir. I will make the inquiries at once.
Thomas nodded.
First class, please.
He said.
No delays.
Henry inclined his head.
I'll see to it personally, my lord.
As Henry turned to leave, Thomas returned to the window, his gaze fixed on the garden below. The decision had been made. The machinery was already in motion. There would be no waiting now. He took his seat again in his chair, the candle burning low. Outside, he heard a gentle roll of thunder as raindrops began to sprinkle the lawn. He believed the confusion would be resolved with time, with conversation, with the correction of records. He did not know that even as his letter began its journey west, another had already been sent south, carrying a truth he was not yet prepared to face. He took a long sip of brandy, his heart pounding in his chest as he considered the events of the day. For every whispered vow, for every shared glance, for every moment of tenderness, there now lingered a shadow. Thomas blew out the candle, but the darkness did not bring peace. The ledger's ink lingered in his mind, stark and undeniable. Lydia Weatherby, presumed deceased. And yet, in New York, a woman bore her name, her face. He had touched her hand, kissed her lips, heard her whisper his name in the dark. There had to be an explanation. A clerical error, a misreport, some reasonable mistake born of chaos. Thomas pressed a hand to his brow, willing himself to dismiss the lingering uncertainty. But once a doubt is sown, it cannot easily be uprooted. And this one, he feared, would grow like wild roses, unable to be tamed. This doubt would hang like wisteria from the tall, imposing columns of Weatherby House.